Sophie and I had been inseparable since childhood. We were best friends, partners in crime, confidants, and sisters in every sense of the word. Growing up together, we shared everything, from our dreams to our secrets. We laughed, cried, and supported each other through every trial life threw at us. I always thought of Sophie as the one person in my life who truly understood me. I trusted her more than anyone else, and she had never once given me a reason to doubt her loyalty. Even as we grew older, our bond never wavered. She was there for me during the happiest moments of my life, like when I got married to Ethan, the man I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. Sophie was my maid of honor, standing by my side as I said I do. She was more than just a friend to me. She was family. Ethan and I had been married for 4 years when things began to change. At first, it was small things. Ethan coming home late from work, spending long hours on the phone, or becoming distant when we were together. I tried to tell myself that it was just stress, that he was busy at work, that everything was fine. But deep down, I could feel the distance between us growing, and it left me unsettled. I started confiding in Sophie more and more, telling her about my worries and how I felt like something was off in my marriage. Sophie was always there to listen, offering comfort and advice, reminding me not to jump to conclusions. She reassured me that relationships had their ups and downs, and that I shouldn't let my fears cloud my judgment. I trusted her completely, believing that she had my best interests at heart. After all, she was my best friend, the person who knew me better than anyone else. But little did I know, Sophie was keeping a secret from me, one that would devastate me in a way I never thought possible. The truth was hidden beneath the surface, masked by the comforting words she offered, and I, in my blind trust, never questioned it. One day, I came home early from work, feeling an unexpected surge of energy. I had planned to surprise Ethan with a nice dinner, hoping to reconnect after a few weeks of emotional distance. The house was eerily quiet when I entered. I called out for Ethan, but there was no response. I assumed he was in the office, finishing up some work, so I made my way upstairs to change into something more comfortable. But as I walked past our bedroom, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was the TV or maybe the radio. But then I recognized the voices. They weren't coming from the TV. They were coming from inside the bedroom. My heart began to race as I approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. I didn't know what I expected to find, but nothing could have prepared me for the scene that unfolded before my eyes. There, in the middle of our bed, were Sophie and Ethan. They were laughing, their arms wrapped around each other, completely unaware of my presence. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The two people I trusted most in the world, my husband and my best friend, were in each other's arms, betraying me in the worst way possible. The world around me seemed to disappear as the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Ethan and Sophie were having an affair. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my friendship, was a lie. The pain, the shock, and the betrayal were overwhelming. I felt as if the ground had been ripped from under me and I was falling into an abyss. I wanted to scream, to run away, but I was frozen. How could this have happened? How long had this been going on? I couldn't comprehend the depth of the betrayal. The man I had married, the woman I had trusted with my heart, had been hiding something from me all along. Sophie was the first to notice me standing there in the doorway. Her face turned pale, and she immediately pulled away from Ethan. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Ethan, too, looked at me with wide eyes, his face filled with panic. But there was no apology, no remorse, just silence. In that moment, I knew my life had been shattered beyond repair. The people I loved, the people I thought I could trust with my heart, had torn me apart. I couldn't process it, couldn't make sense of what had just happened. All I could feel was the weight of the betrayal crushing me, and I had no idea how to move forward from this. The silence in the room was deafening. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, staring at Ethan and Sophie, two people I had loved and trusted more than anyone. Ethan looked at me, his face a mixture of guilt and fear, but his eyes didn't show the regret I had hoped to see. There was no sorrow in his gaze, no genuine apology, just a man caught in his lie trying to find an escape. Sophie, on the other hand, stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. She was trying to speak, but no words came out, her face a pale reflection of the betrayal I felt. She was the one person in my life who I thought I could confide in, the woman who knew my heart better than anyone else. But now, seeing her in Ethan's arms, I realized that everything I had believed about our friendship was a lie. Why? I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. My mind raced with questions, but that one word seemed to sum up everything I needed to know. Why would they do this to me? Why would Sophie, my best friend, betray me like this? Why would Ethan, the man I married and pledged my life to, turn his back on me for her? Sophie looked like she wanted to say something, but she couldn't find the words. She stepped toward me, her eyes pleading, but I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed, as if the ground beneath me had suddenly turned to quicksand. Ethan stood up from the bed, his voice trembling as he spoke. I never wanted to hurt you, Grace, he said, the words coming out in a broken whisper. It just happened. I don't know how it happened, but I never meant for you to find out like this. His words hit me like a slap in the face. You never meant for me to find out? I repeated, the anger bubbling to the surface. So, what? You thought you could just keep this a secret forever? You thought you could destroy everything we had, and I would never know? How long has this been going on, Ethan? How long have you been lying to me? Sophie finally spoke, her voice shaky. Grace, I am so sorry. I never meant for it to get this far. I know I've hurt you, and I can never make it right, but please, please understand, it wasn't just about the affair. It was about us, me and Ethan. We were we were just connecting in a way that we never could before. I never meant for you to find out like this. Her words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Connecting? They had been connecting behind my back, while I trusted them both completely. I had trusted Sophie with my deepest secrets, and I had given Ethan my heart. And now, here they were, standing in front of me, admitting to the lies they had been living for God knows how long. I can't believe this, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. I can't believe you would do this to me, Sophie. You were supposed to be my best friend. And Ethan, you were supposed to be the man I could rely on. You were the one person I thought I could count on, and you both betrayed me. Ethan stepped forward, his hand outstretched as if trying to comfort me, but I took a step back, my body stiff with anger. I didn't want his touch. I didn't want his apologies. All I wanted was for this nightmare to end, for everything to go back to the way it was. But I knew, deep down, that things would never be the same. I don't know how to fix this, Grace, Ethan said, his voice desperate. But I want to try. Please, let me try. I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you, but I love you, and I want to make things right. The words felt hollow. I didn't feel loved. I felt betrayed, abandoned, and utterly alone. There was no making things right after what they had done. There was no going back to the way things were. I don't think I can forgive you, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. You've destroyed everything we built, Ethan, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And Sophie, I turned to look at her, my heart breaking all over again. You were my best friend. I never thought you'd be capable of this. I don't know how I can ever look at you the same way again. Sophie's face crumpled as she took a step toward me, but I held up my hand, stopping her in her tracks. No, I said firmly. Don't. Don't try to make this better. Because you can't. You've both hurt me in a way that can't be undone. I need time. I need space. I need to figure out what comes next. But right now, I don't want to talk to either of you. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the two people I thought I could trust. My world was shattered, and I didn't know where to go from here. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days felt like a blur. My emotions were in turmoil. I couldn't escape the images of Ethan and Sophie together, the way they had looked at each other, as if they had no care in the world for the damage they had done. I had tried to stay strong, to carry on with my daily routine, but it was impossible. Every little thing reminded me of what I had lost. The empty spaces in our home felt like the echoes of a life that no longer existed. I found myself scrolling through old pictures, remembering the love I thought I had with Ethan, the way we had once made plans for the future, imagining a life together. But now it all seemed like a cruel joke. It was hard to come to terms with the fact that everything I had believed in had been based on lies. Sophie, who had always been there for me, was now someone I could no longer trust. And Ethan, my husband, the person I thought would always be by my side, had destroyed the foundation of everything we had built. I avoided their calls, their messages, and any attempt they made to apologize. I couldn't bear to hear their voices, to listen to their excuses. The anger and hurt that consumed me made it hard to think straight. All I wanted was space. I needed time to process, to figure out how to move forward. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt the most. It was the feeling of being utterly alone. I had spent years pouring my heart into my marriage, trusting that Ethan would be there for me, that Sophie would have my back no matter what. But in the blink of an eye, it all fell apart. I realized how little I had truly known about the people closest to me. It was as if the rug had been ripped out from under me, and I was left with nothing but shattered trust and a broken heart. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I began to gather the strength to confront the situation head on. I knew I couldn't keep running from the pain, but I also knew I wasn't ready to face either of them just yet. I needed time to heal on my own terms. The emotional wound they had inflicted would take time to heal, but I had to start somewhere. I began to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I took long walks in the park, started doing things I loved but had abandoned for the sake of my marriage. I enrolled in a painting class, something I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. It was in these small, personal acts that I began to rediscover a part of myself that had been buried for too long. I reached out to my family, something I hadn't done much in the past few years. They had always been supportive, but my focus had been so consumed by my relationship with Ethan and Sophie that I had neglected them. My mom, dad, and even my siblings became my pillars of support. They didn't judge me or try to fix things. They just listened, offered comfort, and reminded me that I was strong. They reminded me of my worth, of everything I had to offer. I wasn't defined by Ethan's betrayal, nor by Sophie's deception. I was me, strong, resilient, and capable of overcoming this. With their support, I began to rebuild my confidence. I started seeing a therapist to help me process the emotional roller coaster I had been on. Talking to someone who wasn't involved in the situation allowed me to see things from a different perspective. I wasn't weak for feeling hurt. I wasn't a failure for not being able to hold my marriage together. I was human, and I had every right to feel pain, but I also had the power to heal. One afternoon, after a particularly hard therapy session, I sat in my car outside a cafe, contemplating everything I had learned about myself in the past few weeks. The journey wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I could ever trust again, or if I would be able to forgive. But one thing was clear: I was starting to take control of my own life. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I was learning how to live with it and how to move forward. I hadn't made any decisions about Ethan or Sophie yet. I didn't know what the future held, and I wasn't in a rush to figure it out. Right now, I was focusing on rebuilding myself. I had lost so much, but I was beginning to realize that I hadn't lost everything. I still had the most important thing left: myself. As I sat in that car, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer let anyone else's actions dictate my happiness. I would heal, I would grow, and when I was ready, I would decide what was next for me. But I wasn't going to let the betrayal define me. I was stronger than that. The weeks that followed were a turning point in my healing process. As I started focusing on myself, my confidence began to grow again, albeit slowly. The pain was still there, lingering in the background, but it no longer controlled me. I began to see the silver lining in the dark cloud that had loomed over my life for so long. I wasn't just surviving, I was learning to thrive. Each day that I took a step forward felt like a victory, no matter how small. I continued to immerse myself in the activities that made me feel alive: painting, hiking, reconnecting with old friends. My circle of support had expanded to include people who truly cared for me and my well being. I wasn't alone in this. Slowly, I began to realize that while Ethan and Sophie's betrayal had been incredibly painful, it had also given me the opportunity to rediscover who I was. I was no longer defined by my marriage or my past friendships. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who wasn't afraid to stand on her own. But as time passed, the weight of the betrayal still sat heavy on my heart. I thought I had forgiven Ethan and Sophie, but every now and then I would catch myself reliving the moment I found them together. The hurt was always there, just beneath the surface, ready to resurface when I least expected it. I knew that forgiveness wasn't something that could be forced. It was something that would come when I was ready. I knew I had to face them eventually. The unresolved tension between us was wearing on me, and I could feel the emotional distance stretching further each day. I knew I couldn't keep running from the situation. I had to confront it, and most importantly, I had to find closure, whether it was from them or from within myself. One day, I decided to reach out to Ethan. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I needed to hear his side of the story. I had been avoiding him for weeks, hoping he would somehow come to his senses and offer an apology. But I had realized that waiting for him to fix things wasn't going to help me heal. I needed to take control of the situation. I needed to find my own closure. When I called him, I could feel my heart racing. I hadn't spoken to him since that day. The thought of facing him again brought up so many emotions: anger, sadness, frustration. But there was also a part of me that wanted to hear the truth. I wanted to know how we had gotten here. I needed to hear from him why he had chosen to betray me in such a hurtful way. When he answered, his voice sounded hesitant. He knew what this conversation was about, and I could tell he was nervous. "Grace," he started, his voice filled with regret. "I've been waiting for you to reach out. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to explain. I need you to understand that this wasn't something I planned. I never meant to hurt you." "I don't know if I can ever understand," I said quietly. "But I'm listening." The conversation was difficult. He apologized profusely, admitting that he had made a mistake. He explained that it had started innocently enough, a connection with Sophie that grew into something deeper. I listened to him, trying to absorb his words, but the pain was still there. His words didn't undo the betrayal. They didn't change the fact that he had hurt me, that he had broken my trust in the worst way possible. But hearing him speak with genuine remorse gave me some sense of clarity. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet, but I could see that he was truly sorry. And that, in a way, was enough for now. After we finished talking, I felt a strange sense of relief. The anger I had been holding on to for so long started to fade, replaced by a deeper understanding. I wasn't going to forget what happened, but I was starting to see that forgiveness wasn't about letting Ethan off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the burden of resentment. It wasn't about him, it was about me. Later that week, I decided to meet with Sophie. I had avoided her calls, avoided seeing her, but I knew that in order to move forward, I needed to confront her. It wasn't just about getting answers, it was about reclaiming my own power. I was no longer the victim of their betrayal. I was in control of my own healing, and it was time to take the next step. When I saw Sophie, I was surprised by how much she had changed. She looked different. Her posture was smaller, her eyes filled with shame. She too was seeking closure. The moment we locked eyes, the tension between us was palpable. But there was no anger in my heart anymore, just an overwhelming sadness for what had been lost. "I don't expect forgiveness, Grace," Sophie said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know that I'm so sorry for what I've done. I hurt you in the worst possible way, and I can never make it right. But I'm here if you need to talk." I looked at her for a long moment, letting her words sink in. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sophie, but I need you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to let go of the anger and the pain. But that doesn't mean I can forget what happened." Sophie nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do is be sorry." I walked away from that conversation with a sense of finality. I wasn't ready to let go of everything yet, but I was beginning to see that healing meant forgiving them. Not for them, but for me. I had to release the past so that I could move forward. The weeks after my conversation with Sophie were a period of profound introspection. I had done the hard work of acknowledging the pain, of facing the betrayal head on, and now I was focusing on how to move forward. Healing wasn't an instant process. It wasn't about waking up one day and suddenly forgetting what had happened. It was about learning how to live with the hurt and still choose to live fully. I spent more time with my family, reconnecting with the people who had always been there for me and who had never let me down. My siblings, my parents, they had been my rock, supporting me from the sidelines, letting me process everything in my own time. They didn't pressure me to make decisions or force me into forgiveness. They simply listened, and that was all I needed. One day, as I was walking through a park alone, I stopped by a bench, watching the ducks swim across the calm water. The scene felt peaceful, too peaceful for the chaos I had been living through. But I realized something important in that moment. I had been so consumed by my anger, by my disappointment, that I had forgotten the simple beauty of life around me. I wasn't just a victim of betrayal. I was still me, capable of finding joy, capable of healing. Over time, I started to piece together my life again, brick by brick. I reconnected with my passions, with things I had once loved but had set aside. Photography, for example, something I had always enjoyed but hadn't made time for during my marriage. I found myself lost in the viewfinder of my camera, capturing beautiful moments that I had once overlooked. There was a sense of calm in it, a feeling of control I hadn't felt in months. Taking the time to appreciate the small, beautiful things in life became a therapeutic escape. Every picture I took felt like a reminder that life, despite the heartbreak, could still be beautiful. I also began to focus on myself, on who I was, outside of my relationship, outside of the friendship that had been torn apart. I started exercising again, something I had neglected for too long. I went to yoga classes, began running in the mornings, and focused on regaining my physical strength. I knew that taking care of my body would also help me heal emotionally. For the first time in years, I was taking care of myself in a way that wasn't dependent on anyone else's actions or approval. But one of the most surprising things was how I began to forgive. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a magical moment where all the anger and bitterness simply vanished. But with time, I started to let go of the weight that had been holding me back. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about saying that what they did was okay. It wasn't. It was about releasing the hold that anger had on me so that I could finally be free. I began to understand that Ethan and Sophie's actions had nothing to do with my worth. It wasn't a reflection of who I was as a person. They had made choices, hurtful, damaging choices, but those choices didn't define me. I wasn't the sum of their mistakes. I was stronger than that. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized how much I had grown. I had come a long way from the woman who had walked out of that house, heartbroken and shattered. I had taken control of my life again. I wasn't the same woman I had been before all of this, but that wasn't a bad thing. I was wiser, more self aware, and more in tune with my own needs. The pain of the betrayal would always be there, but it no longer controlled me. It had shaped me, but it didn't define me. In time, I chose to let go of the past. I no longer harbored anger toward Ethan or Sophie. I realized that while they had hurt me, they had also taught me an important lesson. I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had faced my worst fears, my deepest pain, and I had come out of it stronger. The final step was acceptance. I didn't need to keep questioning why it happened or what could have been done differently. I didn't need answers from them anymore. I had found my peace within myself. I wasn't waiting for closure from Ethan or Sophie. I was giving it to myself. I was choosing to move forward, to embrace a future that was full of possibilities, not shackled by the past. Months later, I ran into Ethan at a coffee shop. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I didn't feel that old anger rise up inside me. I simply looked at him and nodded. He tried to apologize again, but I stopped him with a gentle wave of my hand. "You don't need to say anything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've moved on. I hope you find what you're looking for." And with that, I walked away. It was the final moment of closure I needed. I had forgiven him, not for him, but for me. I had freed myself from the chains of resentment, and I was ready to embrace the future that awaited me. As I walked out of the coffee shop and into the crisp air, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the betrayal, free from the hurt, free from the past. And with that freedom, I was ready to start the next chapter of my life. Betrayal can break you, but it can also build you. The most important relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. Through pain, we find our strength, and through forgiveness, we find freedom. Have you ever faced betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's support each other in our journeys of healing. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more empowering stories.